Welcome to another episode of Chicopedia, and in today's exciting episode, we shall be unboxing this. Another box. Hold on, there's more to it than that. Alright. My kindly assistant here.
Oh, there we go.
Oh, there we go. Oh, look at that, folks. Yes, today we are unboxing the Batman Year One Artist's Edition, written by Frank Miller and arted by none other than David Mazzuchelli. Let's check it out together, shall we? So, I'm a little remiss in getting this video out. I got my Batman Year One Artist's Edition almost fully a year ago, and I shot the video that you're about to see almost immediately after. I was on the cusp of creating this channel at that time, but I didn't have the time or the resources for generating more content to follow it up. So it just sat there on my phone or my hard drive for almost a year now. So without further ado, let's jump into it. This is an amazing book. If you don't have one already, I put a link in the description. You should definitely check this one out while they're still available. Comprising issues 404 through 407 of the the ongoing Batman comic book series, Batman Year One has emerged as perhaps the definitive Batman arc. These days it's more popularly read as the graphic novel you see here in front of you that collects all 4 issues. Various editions have been released over the years with different additional material. There's also a black and white edition available. But for most people approaching Batman Year One, this is the way a non-collector will usually find it. It's around $20, and it gives you that full arc. From the very first panel of issue 404, the first part of Batman Year One, we are treated to David Mazzucchelli's very realistic depiction of the people and characters in this story, which runs in tandem with Frank Miller's very gritty, if not to say realistic, but certainly very realistically dark style of writing. And at once it becomes, the origin story of Batman, as the term Year One implies, but it is also the concurrent origin story of Lieutenant James Gordon, who we know from Batman canon is bound to become the Commissioner Gordon, who we first met on the very first panel of Detective Comics number 27, way back in 1939. In his introduction to the artist's edition of this book that we'll be taking a look at here in just a moment, David Mazzucchelli, the artist of these fantastic pages, clues readers in that a huge part of this story's success, or its artistic success rather, was the contribution of his own wife, Richmond Lewis. We see credited back here on the cover. And Richmond Lewis is responsible for the color that you see in the finalized version of Batman Year One. And the sorts of processes and innovations that Richmond came up with to give this story, this kind of washed out, very gritty, earthy kind of look, as opposed to the 3-color, kind of Technicolor, very bright and garish comics that would have populated the stands next to it and had been the norm for decades prior within the Batman series. So Mazzucchelli's assertion there is that the artist edition, again, which we'll look at here in just a second, is rather incomplete. That the story itself is more than just Frank Miller's script. It's more than just David Mazzucchelli's lines. It is the sum of all of the parts of the story, the line art, and Richmond Lewis's magnificent colors on this 4-issue run. For anyone purchasing the Batman Year One Artist Edition, you may in fact be surprised by the overall size of it. I know that I was. I was anticipating a large book. I don't know that I was anticipating a book quite this large. And as you saw in the earlier actual unboxing of when this book arrived in the mail, I was just blown away by the scale of this thing. And I will show it to you here in conjunction with the original graphic novel, which is standard comic book size. So if you can imagine my hand, in comparison with a real normal comic book size. That's just how big this thing is. You could put legs on it and make it a coffee table book all in itself. When I first heard that this was going to be made available, I was absolutely thrilled. I immediately went online and added it to my Amazon wish list, and I got very lucky this year and I received this as my 43rd birthday present. And boy, what a treat. This is just a gorgeous, gorgeous book. It's filled with the frontispieces and sort of end papers here, filled with these wonderful pieces of art, some from the story, others that were just sort of developmental. And we get everything down to water and coffee stains. We get a David Mazzuchelli sketch that he apparently made when he was 6 years old. And kind of moving on and through, we get this fantastic insight I've already mentioned from Mazzuchelli himself, who talks about a bit of his process and how he came to be working on this particular book, and that of his wife Richmond Lewis, the amazing innovations and contributions she made to the coloring of it. And then we get his character breakdowns, how he based Bruce Wayne. If you can't tell, this one down here in the bottom left, I think, is the most telling, that Bruce Wayne is, in fact, based on Gregory Peck. We get a few more over here. And this very, looks like the 1940s original movie Batman, the black and white serial Batman. But some very, very cool art. Cover pieces. And yeah, it's the entire 4-issue run. We get David's breakdowns or thumbnails, the sort of roughs for some of these pages, pencils in some cases. And each issue is sort of pre-outlined in this way, so we can see it in thumbnail form all the way through. And then it jumps to each individual issue. And like that opening panel that we saw from the colored edition. And it is line for line exactly what we have in the standard edition. It's just each one of these pages, if you can see, is a down to the last dust particle, beautiful scan of each and every one of the original artboards. Now, one of my, I'll call it my day job, is as an art professor. I teach a couple of beginning drawing classes as well as a more academic art survey course. And something that I tell my students often, especially when we're talking about commercial art versus fine art, that sometimes there are pieces of work out there that blur those lines and distinctions. And I know for me, Batman Year One is certainly one of those artistic gray areas. And I've said that my Mona Lisa, meaning like the piece of art that I revere as much as Leonardo da Vinci's probably the most famous painting in the world, now hanging in the Louvre in Paris, is actually a single page from the Batman Year One graphic novel. I believe I'm coming up on it here. Yeah, here we go. And I've said often that if I could own just one piece of original comic book art, it would be this forthcoming page here. And if you've read the book, you probably know the one I'm talking about. We've got Gotham's elite meeting for a feast. Commissioner Loeb is there. We've already found out what a duplicitous douchebag he is. And then Batman arrives outside of the mansion house where all this is going on. He lobs a grenade at the wall, and that final panel, boom! And then we get this. And I've showed the color version of this from the original, but this, ladies and gentlemen, and everything in between here, this is the one piece of art that I wish I could own the original of. And I believe this is probably about as close as I'm ever going to get, is this facsimile copy. But it is the famous "You Have Eaten Well" page. When Batman has blown a hole in the wall, ladies and gentlemen, you have eaten well. And just this lovely central composition of Batman, the way the smoke cuts across it, the mystery of it, that menacing look on his, well, you don't even see the look on his face, just the eyes in that black shape. Just how graphic and beautiful this is. And then just this wonderful bit down here where Batman is putting the lid on the flambe, and we get this diagonal of darkness. It just leads us into that final panel of all black. And they got it so fine you can even see the brushstrokes in it. I am just so thrilled to finally have this. Backtracking a little bit here and going to the cover for what would have been issue 405 from the regular series. Again, we can see the dust and imperfections that have ended up on the original art boards in the prevailing 36 years since this was originally published, and probably a little bit more than that since it was originally drawn. One of the attentions to detail that they've included here, and I was already blown out of the water by this book, but this just pushed it that much further for me. You can see you've got this very graphic look inside of Wayne Manor, those really tall arched windows, and Bruce Wayne about to put on the Batman cowl. And I thought, oh, okay, so it's just they've faded out the ink here, but this is part of the overall printing process for this and how this would have been managed. And what it is this page is a translucency itself, a kind of a transparency. And then we have the black line art of Batman just by himself on an artboard, registered perfectly to this, again, this kind of, it's not acetate exactly, it's sort of like a vellum kind of material. But also, consistent with everything else in this book. The paper is a beautiful quality. It's not so thick that it feels like cardboard, so it's not as thick as the original art boards per se, but still feels, solid, substantial in the hand, of archival quality. So this isn't a book that is going to yellow and age, perhaps like an original of this comic might, printed on what then would have been cheaper newsprint. So, if you're on the fence about something like this, or I'd say get off the fence, get out there and get yourself a copy. This is just a beautiful book. So the book itself, and while I've recommended, going out there and getting yourself a copy of this, it is the book, the cover price, let me show you here, is $150 US or $195 in Canada. So it's not I wouldn't call this the standard kind of impulse buy. It's certainly much more expensive than the standard graphic novel edition, which usually runs, this was $14.99. So literally 10 times as much to buy the artist edition. So I guess that begs the question of who this book is really for. And I would say, anybody who is a longtime fan of the Batman comics, certainly this could deserve a place in your ever-expanding library. I'm a bit biased as an artist and art professor myself, that I would say that this book is absolutely a brilliant resource for students of illustration, of comics art, and that sort of craft. Even if you're even if you don't necessarily work in the composition and creation of line art, if you're a colorist, if you're a letterer, it's really just fantastic to see how this very definitive storyline, which has been hugely influential. It's not like it's presented verbatim in the film versions of Batman, but you can certainly see this book's influence on books like movies like Batman Begins, and also its sequels. This doesn't have really any of your standard Batman villains in it. There is no Joker. There is no Two-Face. It's Batman really just kind of going toe-to-toe with Gotham itself and finding out who his friends are, who his enemies are, whether, even people who should probably be sympathetic to his aims. He's a vigilante, and that is technically illegal. But he becomes sort of passive friends with James Gordon just through this and a mutual disgust for how corrupt Gotham's police department has become through people like Commissioner Loeb. and Lieutenant Flass, who we last saw kind of back here at the beginning of the book, really. Flass kind of emerges as this quintessential bully. Here he is beating up on some kids for whatever, and then when he comes back to talk to Gordon about it, he says, well, he throws him what he thinks is a switchblade to justify this act of violence, and Gordon reveals that it's just a comb, and Flass says, I'm only human, Jimmy. He is. He's very human, and he'll pay for it. And I think that's what Batman ultimately became about. It isn't about colorful costumes and cool gimmicks. The original disguise that Bruce comes out on the street in, he looks like like an army vet, maybe a longshoreman. He's put a scar on his face to help disguise his appearance, and he's wearing a military jacket and jeans and a beanie cap. And I kind of lied when I said that there weren't any of the usual villains in here. We do get our introduction to Selina Kyle as Catwoman, which is about as deep into the canon as it goes. The rest is just this very gritty story of justice versus corruption, good versus evil, and it's masterfully told. It's so beautifully drawn. If you're a Batman fan, if you're a fan of comic art and illustration, any of that, and you can justify the $150 expense for what will become probably the largest book you own, unless you are already a collector of artists' editions, in which case this probably won't surprise you at all. This book is for you.